Okay, my name is Veronica Margaret Bender. It was Kirk-Hessler. My maiden name was Kirk-Hessler. I was born August 25th, 1928, on a farm about 15 miles from Aberdeen, South Dakota. And I lived there on the farm until I was 17 years old. Okay, well, I grew up on the farm. I have 11 brothers and sisters. I have 6 brothers and 4 sisters and myself. So I was the second youngest one that was born. So by the time I was born, my oldest brother and sister were 20 and 21 years old. So I was pretty little. Some of my brothers had left home before I even knew them. He went to the service, and I never saw him until he come home from the service. And I did a lot of farm work. I fed the chickens. We didn't have any running water. We had to carry all our water from a well for about a quarter of a block, even for our chickens and animals. And we just had a lot of work. I started milking cows when I was about 10 years old. And we didn't have any transportation. Everything was walking. Summertime, most of the time was barefoot. And I had to, as one of the younger girls, and the boys were out in the field working. So if we had to get the cows were always down the southern end of the field. And they always went south, and the wind was from the south, so I had to walk down a quarter of a mile to get the cows and bring them up. Put them in the barn, put them in their stanchions, and help milk them. We didn't milk a lot. It was just enough for our family that we were able to sell like a 3-gallon can of milk or cream. We used the milk for ourselves. But before that, I was going to school, so I was like 7 years old. We lived about a quarter of a mile from the school. In a couple of years, the teacher stayed with us because it was so stormy. And we didn't have any water at school, so we had to, we carried, my sister and I, my older brother went to school 1 year with me, and then he graduated. But we had to carry the water to school, and it was in a gallon syrup pail. In those days, the Caro syrup come in gallon pails and half-gallon pails. So we got $1 a month for taking a gallon of water to school and dumped it in the water cooler. And that was a big time money. So I graduated. I was 13 years old, and same schoolhouse, one-room schoolhouse. And it was cold winters, but sometimes the teachers stayed with us. So I guess after we lived like 15 miles from Aberdeen, so there was no way to go to high school. None of my brothers and sisters went to high school. So there's no way we went to high school. So I stayed home on the farm and did the chores and learned to sew and learned to embroidery and just whatever farm chores were. And my mother, by that time, well, I had a couple of brothers that come home off and on when they weren't working. But I learned to sew. My mother had an old treadle sewing machine, and I would hem the dish towels that we got from the flour sacks. And that's how I learned how to sew on a sewing machine. Okay. And of course we did we did have a washing machine, but had a motor on it. So it was a regular old Maytag. And of course, there again, the water was very short. We had to really save it. You did 5 loads of wash in one washing machine and 1 load of water. And you had to have a big double boiler that held like 3 gallons of water that you put on the cook stove to heat, and that was what we used for washing our clothes. And then we had another tub that was the rinse water that you put bluing in. And of course, first you put the white shirts in, and then the dish towels and underwear, and you just gradually added the darker clothes to it till it was done.
Yeah.
And of course, there was no washer and no dryers then, and we had a clothesline that was about 50 yards from the house, long clothesline. So you had to take the clothes once after I was out of school. I took the clothes over and hung them on the clothesline, and of course that even was in the wintertime, and of course in the wintertime everything froze, and you'd walk the men's underwear back to the house because they were froze. But you hung them around the house, and it really made a fresh smell in the house. It was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of hard work. I mean, it was, there was just no modern about it. We had no electricity, no indoor toilet, no running water. So, I mean, you just learned to cope with it. You didn't, and everybody else didn't have any more than we did. I mean, we were just, and my brothers, they were hunters. So our food usually was, we had big gardens, and our food was from the garden. We had chickens and we had eggs, and we'd have a couple of pigs, and we'd butcher them in December. That was our meat. We did canning. My brothers were big hunters, so we had wild pheasants and turkey. We had no turkeys there, but we had wild geese and ducks. So that was a lot of our meals. And also cottontails. We had little cottontails that the boys would shoot. Yeah. So that was pretty much what we had to eat. We had did a lot of canning, did a lot of pickles, because we had a big garden in the summertime. And it was all hard work, but in the wintertime, it was, you just kind of laid back and for fun. And of course, my brother was 5 years older, so he was sort of out of the picture, He was with the big boys, but my sister was 2 years younger. So her and there was 5 years between my brother and I, and then my sister and I were 2 years of difference. So we pretty much grew up together. So we didn't get many toys for Christmas. There wasn't nothing for toys. You got a bag with some nuts in it and orange and maybe a couple pieces of candy. And my sister and I, we played house together. We played Anne and Jane. I was Anne and she was Jane, and we played house. That was our entertainment in the wintertime. And we had no books. There was few magazines, but there was no reading, and no education at all. My mother could not speak English or read or write. So my dad could read and he could write. So, of course, when we went to the grocery store, my mom's, did the reading and writing for her, She would buy groceries by the look on the can, if it was peas or corn or, whatever. But there was a few groceries bought. If we bought a loaf of bread, that was a really big treat. And then we had chickens, and we'd get a little 12 dozen crate of eggs a week. And we had like 3 gallons of cream we'd take in. And usually that little crate of eggs bought the groceries we needed. And the 3 gallon of cream The eggs, you probably got 25 cents a dozen, the most, you know. They're selling in the stores 3 dozen for $1. And the cream, we did our own, made our own butter and cottage cheese, and the little 3-gallon can of cream did the outside expenses that we needed. So then we had no electricity at the time, but my older brother, he was really self-taught. I think he got the Popular Mechanics magazine, so he learned a lot out of there. So he put up a wind charger and hooked a battery down the basement, and had the wind charger charge up the battery so we'd have a radio. That's how we put a car battery on it, and that was our radio. That was our only outside communication. We did get mail every day, but we had to walk a mile to get that. But
Wow.
it was quite a life. Well, my mother and dad, they both spoke German. I mean, they were both hardworking people. I mean, my dad did not communicate with us. I mean, my mother did the talking and the bossing. And my dad, he just kind of followed along, but we really respected him. I mean, nobody talked back to him. And it was funny, it was one of the things. When New Year's came along, we had to be sure to wish our dad Happy New Year in German, because we talked everything in German at home. So, and my mother, she had a stepmother, so they both had a really hard life. So she got warmed out to different people. So she really didn't know that much about cooking, but just the staples. And my dad, he was a illegitimate child, so he got pushed around. So they had no education at all. So it was, they were good parents. I mean, they provided for us, but there was nothing fancy. Of course, by the time Rita and I came along, I mean, all the other kids were gone, and, it was kind of, well, if they went to company, here were the 2 little kids, kind of sitting in the other room. But there was no place going to entertainment or doing anything. Once we got to school, and then there was the shrine circus, I guess, so we really got to go to the shrine circus at that time. But as far as entertainment, there was nothing. We had kerosene lamps, before my brother put the electricity. After my brother put the electricity in for the radio, and then he decided to get a bigger charger, and he wired the whole house. So we had, 1 light bulb in each room, which was a big plus to them. But otherwise, we just had a kerosene lamps that we carried from room. So you didn't have much reading light. They were born in Russia. My dad was born in Odessa, and my mother was born in Kunel, Russia. And they kind of grew up there, and then things got really bad in Russia, so Catherine the Great from Germany invited the Russian people to come, and she would give them land and set them up for a home, So that's when a lot of the Russian people migrated to Germany. So hence they're called German Russians, because they were born in Russia, but then they went. Well, then when things changed there in Germany and got bad, so then they start leaving Germany, and that's when a lot of these German Russian people migrated to the United States, because the United States was looking for people to farm their lands. So, and usually they come, we had relatives, my dad had, some relatives, they really didn't know them, but they usually traveled by religion, or if they had a relative or they knew somebody. But they got to New York, and they got on the train, and How they got to Aberdeen, I don't know, but there were a lot of people from that area. So then my dad, well, my mother, they met, I don't know how. They met in Aberdeen and got married, and she had a stepsister that lived in Aberdeen. My dad didn't have any relatives, and they just he worked for the city, and then he decided to go farming, so they took up some land because the government paid him, farmland. And of course, then they started having children, so they had 10 children to, to help the farm. Yeah. And they all helped on the farm then, and they retired from the farm. Well, let's see, I was 16, so my brother took over the farm then, and they moved to town. They had retired. They bought a little house that was like for $3,000 and built a bedroom, another bedroom. It was a 2-story, and built a garage. And had $10,000 that they retired on. That was their retirement. And it did them well, so. So then when they sold the farm, my brother bought the farm, so I stayed on the farm for 6 weeks because he went out and did farming for other people. It was in the fall of the year, so he'd go out and do bundle pitching or hauling grain or whatever. But they had some chickens and some cows on the farm, so somebody had to stay on the farm and take care of those. So I stayed there on the farm by myself for 4 weeks. My transportation was an old bicycle and a horse. So then when he came home and took over the farm, and then I went to town, and we shopped at, what's called National Tea Food Stores, and we shopped there all the time. And of course, my mother, she couldn't speak German. She always spoke really broken, and I mean, you had the same checkers all the time. So when my brother took over the farm, and I went to town, and this was August, and I just turned 17. So I went down the store and applied for a job at the National Tea, where we had been shopping our whole life. And they hired me, and I got a job there, and I started in the produce department, and then I advanced to a checker, and I did some of the book work. And then this young farm boy from North Dakota come along, and his parents did the same thing. They just had retired, and he was looking for a job. So he came to work there, and we kind of got together and ended up getting married a year later. Jake Bender. He was 4 years older than I was. He was nice looking. He was a hard worker. I mean, his folks had moved to town. The neighbor lady said, well, you go down to National Tea, they're always looking for farm boys because they're good workers. So he did. And yeah, he came, and we worked together for a year, and then the next year we got married. Well, we lived in the same direction, and he had a car, and I didn't. So it was kind of convenient, drop me off and take me home. I mean, you went to a movie, there wasn't a lot of money. Once in a while we went to a dance. Back when I was still home, my brother he played the accordion. And he would play for dances, barn dances, accordion dances. And so we went to some of the dances, around. And we got married on October 26th of 47. The wedding, he went and bought a suit at S&L for $19, and I went to Standard Clothing and bought a suit for $15. And had a little corsage, and the big sticker was he was Baptist, very strong Baptist, and we were very strong Catholics. So it didn't work out really nice for the family. For us it was okay, but he, you know, he didn't want to offend his parents, and I didn't offend mine, so he thought, you know, first we weren't, and then we thought, but we couldn't get married in the church. We got married in the parish house by the priest. The wedding was small. The wedding was at my parents' home. We went to the parish house and got married. And we come back, and we had all of Jake's brothers. He come from a big family, and the family, I didn't have too many at home then yet. So we just, I forget what we had for lunch, but I'm sure it was sandwiches of some kind. And beer, we made homemade, my dad made homemade beer all the time. So yes, neighbor lady made a nice big angel food cake. We had a cake. And my dad made homemade wine. And so it was a beautiful fall day. And so the evening come along, and my brother was there with his accordion, and they rolled up the rug in the dining room, played the accordion, and we danced and sang, and had a, you know, Jake's family was there, his brothers and sisters. And then after the dance, we rented the upstairs apartment of my folks. They had the house that they bought had an upstairs and had a big 2 bedrooms and a bath. So we got married. We decided we were just going to stay there because we were the only ones left at home there. So after the dance, we went upstairs and went to bed. It was beautiful. Weather was beautiful. And then we took a road trip up to Bismarck, North Dakota. He had an uncle up there. We went up there to visit. But, it was a small wedding, but it was sufficient. There wasn't money those days. I mean, he was really likable. Everybody liked him. He had a good personality. Everybody liked him. He was funny, and he was as German as you could be, too. So that clicked really well with my folks. And his folks were very nice, too. He had some older sisters, and I learned a lot from them. They were better cooks than my mother was. So I learned a lot from them, and so then we worked at the store. We worked there in Aberdeen for 3 years, and then we were transferred. He was a produce manager, sent to Redfield, South Dakota, as as assistant manager there. And then they asked to come back to Aberdeen. He was a produce manager in Aberdeen because they had a second store there. And then in 51, we got married in 47. 51, I became pregnant with our first daughter. And she was born in Aberdeen. We were living in Aberdeen at the time. So we were there for 3 years. And then the supervisor come and asked us if he would be the manager of the store in Mobridge, South Dakota for the same company. And it was a small store, but it was the beginning of our management. So we were there for 4 years. And well, before we moved to Mobridge, we had another baby with Judy. After 3 years, we had she was born. Linda was born in 51, and she was born in 53 then. And so we had 2 children in Aberdeen. Then we moved to Mobridge, and we were there for 4 years. He was the manager there. And that's when I started doing all the bookkeeping for the store. Never done any bookkeeping in my life. I could write numbers, and I could add and subtract and multiply. But when you worked for a company, you had all these forms to fill out. You just did what they told to do. Well, I could record numbers. I mean, that was a no-brainer. So then we had 15 months later, we had another baby. So that was the third baby. And then 2 years later, we had another baby. So that was 2 babies in Mobridge. So we were there for a while, and then they were opening up a new National Tea store in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And it was going to be the biggest National Tea in South Dakota. And Sioux Falls is the biggest city in South Dakota, too. So he asked to be manager there. So we picked up the 4 kids and sold the home, had bought a home in Mobridge, sold the home, and moved on to Sioux Falls. Well, then we had 2 boys in Sioux Falls. So that was Marty and Randy. And we were there for, let's see, 4 or 5 years, I guess it was. And then we had an old friend that I was a checker in Aberdeen, and he was a carry-out in Aberdeen in the Aberdeen National Tea. And he came back from the services looking for a job, and we hired him in Mobridge when we were still living in Mobridge. So they had 2 children. So we got to be really close friends. We did a lot for each other. So then we moved to Sioux Falls, and he went to work for another super value company, which was a groceries company. And this fellow, this assistant manager that went to work for this other company, he said, you got to go work for this Mr. Randall. I mean, he's, you know. And he would tell Mr. Randall, if you want a good manager, hire Jake Bender. So that went on, you know, for some time. That's the only time I didn't do any bookwork or work at the store. It was the 4 years we were in Sioux Falls, because the store was big. Well, I had 6 kids. The oldest one, 12, you know. So I kind of had my hands full. So then anyway, this Mr. Randall called one day, and he said to Jake, can you meet me at the airport? They flew a plane, meet me at the airport. So I met him at the airport and interviewed him, and then he called him back, I don't know, a short time later, and he said, well, I have 2 stores. I have a store in Huron, South Dakota, and the manager is going to retire soon, and I also have a store we're building in Dubuque, Iowa. So that's what's available. So we decided, you know, I said, where's Dubuque, Iowa? So of course it was as far as away you can get in Iowa. So we said, well, we'll go to, and at this time we had 6 children, and we had a home in Sioux Falls, a beautiful home that we bought new there in Sioux Falls. And so Jake said, well, we'll do the assistant in here in South Dakota, because we'll be close to home. So that's what we told him, that's what we were going to do, because the store in Dubuque hadn't been built yet. They had the foundation up, and this was in June. So he thought we'd go to, we made plans. I was pregnant at the time with Marty, and we were going to move to Sioux Falls. We were going to move, you know, to Huron. In fact, we bought a house in Huron. And I had address and everything changed. You know, we had the home sold, and well, the day before the movers come, my husband got up and he said, we're not moving, we're not going to Huron. He said, that old guy, he's never going to retire. He says, and I'll be there, the assistant. He says, I'm just going to call Mr. Randall and tell him we're going to Dubuque. So, the movers are outside that morning. So we decided to call the people that bought the house. They let us rent it for another 30 days. But then coming to Dubuque, there was nothing available. There was nothing, no rentals, nothing available at that time. And we got to, the people that were putting up Plaza 20 at the time, they were helpful. They were trying to find us a home too. So then, of course, I was due with Marty. So we had to change doctors, or we stayed there. We stayed the month of June. We stayed in Sioux Falls because the store wasn't going to be open until October. So we stayed in Sioux Falls for the extra month. And Marty was born in Sioux Falls then. So when we moved from Sioux Falls to Dubuque, the baby was 3 weeks old, and Linda was 12 years old. So 6 babies. So that worked out well. They had my husband go around to different stores to see, just to work different, get different experiences. So then the store opened in Dubuque. We were open the same weekend, the same week that Kmart opened in Plaza 20. So then that's when I became the full-time bookkeeper. He was the manager and I was the bookkeeper. And of course with 6 babies, it was a little challenge. They come over and they set up the store, and I was ready to go, and they come over with a checkbook, and he says, here, we put $50,000 in the bank, and it's yours. Like that. We were in charge. It was called Randall Foods, and we had to hire all the help. And I did all the bookkeeping, and we had to train cashiers. Everything was brand new. And they just come and brought the checkbook, and you do this, and you do this, and you send in the report, it's all yours. Where a chain store, they tell you what to do. Where this was all on our own. So of course, with all those babies at home, I either went, because Linda wasn't big enough to babysit yet, and it was hard. I had no family. And it was hard to find, somebody to babysit, because, they just come along, and it was just another baby, and it was just never a hardship. And we never said how many kids we were going to have. They just come along, and as they got older, we just taught them right from wrong and respect, and that's how they all grew up with then. So after we got here then, and I did all the book work, we had, that time the calculators were this big heavy calculator, and I did all the time cards, I figured all the time cards, I wrote out all the payroll checks, I signed every check that was ever written, and paid all the vendors, So that worked out pretty well, and of course as the children got older, nobody had ever looked for a job. They all had a job. It wasn't asked, it was just required. That's just what you did. And you learn to be honest and trustworthy and, reliable. And that's how they all grew up. We didn't teach them anything. They just learned from us. That's how it was. They went over to St. Joe's in Dubuque. Linda went 1 year in Sioux Falls, and then we moved to Dubuque. And they all, of course, by that time, Linda and Judy and Shirley were in school here. And Mary Jane, they went to kindergarten over at one of the other schools, but they all 6 graduated from St. Joe's, and they all graduated from Wahlert. And of course they all had jobs, and they were all, we belonged to the union, they were paying really good pay, so. Linda, the oldest one, she did go to Marshalltown, went to a 2-year college and got a bookkeeping job. And then she got married and left, and the others, they all had jobs, making good money. And then our youngest one, Marty, he decided he was going to go to college. So he went to college. He went to 1 year to Clark, and then he went to Iowa City. So, and then after we sold the store to Hy-Vee years later, Shirley, she went to classes and she became a teacher. She got an education. But it wasn't all fun and roses when we moved here. Well, we weren't very welcomed, I'll tell you that. We were the first ones to open on Sunday. And you know, the Catholic, little Rome was all Catholic. So of course they were trying to, you know, they were marching, and the Mothers Club come to the store, and it was not good. You know, and some of the priests, the Mothers Club, they come in and they didn't like this magazine, or they didn't like that, or, you know, and they didn't. But then they came for Christmas and wanted a free Christmas tree for the church. So it was a lot of experience, you know. And then the union came and picketed, and of course we joined the union right away, and they made things difficult for, you know, in a way for us, because, you know, like we were open on Sunday, and that was absolutely no for Dubuque. It was just a no. Everybody went to Davenport or Cedar Rapids, but Dubuque was the Holy Grail. So we stayed open on Sundays. And so then they joined the union. The meat department was under another contract, and they wouldn't let us sell a meat unless a butcher was on duty, but they didn't allow the butchers to work on Sunday. So we had to take the meat, we had an open meat cases, we had to cover up the meat cases with paper so people couldn't buy meat on Sunday. These are just the little challenges that we had along the way, you know, that's irritable. So, you know, it was the challenges that, and of course then the unions and the other grocery stores, they were, you know, they weren't happy with us either. We didn't do a whole lot in Sioux Falls. I mean, we're manager there. But as far as socializing, we never were big socializers. We came to Dubuque, and it was our family, you know. You're so involved with your family that you don't have a lot of outside interests. But we had our Christmas parties, you know, employee Christmas parties, and I learned how to get a lot of Christmas parties together and gatherings, and we had some nice help, some good help. And the books closed on Sunday nights. I mean, and I took home the time cards, and I figured all the time cards, and took the calculator home and the checkbook. So I figured the time cards and wrote out the checks. On Monday, by Tuesday morning, I had their checks in the. I took a lot of work at home, and then I had, you know, other invoices and stuff you had to register and everything, and you know, I took home what I could, because you just couldn't find a sitter, you know. Oh, the favorite things. It was you just made a lot of friends and a lot of salespeople, and it was good for us. I mean, it was a challenge, but it was well for us. Mr. Randall, he was such a wonderful man. He was such a good man. I mean, at the time when we went to work for Mr. Randall, there was like 5 company stores, small community stores, you know, 5. And you could buy into the company, you know, buy shares in the company. Well, when we retired, or when they sold the store here, Jake decided to retire. And by that time, the company had 32 stores. So we got to invest in all those, you know, at the time. So when Jake decided to retire, he just got tired of the help in the union, and, you know, so I'm retiring. So that was like in June. So then when he retired, and of course, we were in Plaza 20. We started the store in Plaza 20, and then that got too small. Then we moved out to Target, and we built a new store, a bigger store out there. So he was out there. So then when he decided to retire, and then Mr. Randall said, well, that's a Jake Bender store. We'll just sell it. Bring a new manager. He just sold it. He said, that's a Jake Bender store. I was sitting in church once, not too long ago, and a doctor was sitting in front of us, and we kind of visited, and he says, oh, we still go out to the Bender store. People called it the Bender store, and they still, still do. So he did us very, very, very well. I mean, yeah. He was very giving. I mean, he had his own plane. He flew us to Mexico. He had a place down there. He took us to Hawaii after the 4th year, gave us trips to Hawaii, gave us a trip every year. Fantastic bonuses. I mean, you worked, it was your store and whatever you. Well, of course, we couldn't find anything, so they did find us this house over in Langworthy. It was a 3-bedroom older home, and we knew it was too small, but we just couldn't find. They looked for us, and in fact, I come over 2 weeks before Marty was born, thinking maybe we could help find him something, and we couldn't. But they found us this 3-bedroom home upstairs, and so then after we looked around and we bought a home over in Princeton, off of Devon. We bought a 3-bedroom home there. Well, we knew it was too small, but at that time there was just nothing available. So we made a fixed nice bedroom down the basement, and we had 3 bedrooms upstairs, so it worked out. So we lived there for 4 years, and then we built a home over on Croydon Crest. It was behind, where the gas station is now, that Quick Trip. It used to be another grocery store there. So we built a 4-bedroom home, beautiful 4-bedroom home there, and then after we decided, the kids were all gone, that we didn't need that big of a home, and we were going to Arizona for the winters. Before that, we had a motorhome, and we traveled for 4 years with a motorhome and went to different areas. That was after he had retired. And we motorhome for 4 years, and then after that, we bought a home in Arizona, Mesa, Arizona, and we lived there. Went there for 4 months out of the year for 20 years, and then 3 years ago I decided, it was keeping up 2 homes, and then 20 years ago when we bought the home in Arizona, we sold Croydon Crest, and we bought this. So I've been here then 22 years now. So I'm sure there were spats behind the doors, But overall, I mean, it was nice. We had 4 big bedrooms, and when we built the house, I said we moved so many times that I knew what I wanted. We had a family room on the same floor. We had 4 big bedrooms upstairs. We had big closets. So the kids all had their own rooms, the 2 girls. Well, then they started getting married, and that's when I started sewing, in between. I sewed, we had 2 girls. 2 of the girls got married. They were always their own bride. They were bridesmaid. So I made the bridesmaid dresses for them. And then my niece got married over Christmas, and the girls were bridesmaid for her. So I made 3 velvet bridesmaid dresses for them. So while I was working at the store and the kids at home, once the kids all got to school, and then I had time. So I did a lot of sewing then. And I sewed the girls a lot of their clothes. At that time they were wearing culottes and jackets, and So I did a lot of sewing, I did a lot of craft work, and but none of them ever, the girls never got interested. Of course, they were working at the store, and they had their friends, they each had their friends, and they each did their thing, and some still have the same friends they do things with. Well, you know, they all had their own chores. A lot of times, you know, Linda, she was 12, she was very efficient, you know. And then Judy, she was 3 years younger, but I would prepare the meal, you know, put the meat in here and do the potatoes here and do this, you know, and I would probably go to work at 4 when they got home from school, and when we got home, supper was ready. So they all learned how to cook. And they had to have the table set. Well, when we're all done eating, they had to clean up again. So, I mean, they were just, I mean, they had their chores to do. And so they just, I mean, we never had any disagreements. I mean, just the normal family. Yeah, they had to share bedrooms. So Linda and Judy, they shared a bedroom, and Shirley and Mary and Shirley shared a bedroom. So they had to get along, and then Marty and Randy shared a bedroom. So they had to get, like I say, I don't know what happened in closed doors, but but they all just seemed to grow up fine, and to this day they're such wonderful. Linda and Shirley and Mary live in town here, and I couldn't ask for more wonderful kids. I couldn't be living in my own home if it weren't for the help. But they all come, and they've all been wonderful to me. Randy, he helps me out. He lives in Bellevue, and it's so nice to have the great-grandkids and the grandkids here in town, and it's been pretty good 95 years. I think our biggest trip was the first big trip we took. It was hard to get away for, you know, more than a week or 10 days. But we had a big station wagon. You know how big the station wagon those years. And Marty was like about 2 years old, I think, and we went to California, to Disney and Brunsbury Farm, and we drove with the station wagon. Yeah, Judy, she always got car sick, so she's, I mean, you cringe now when you think about it, but she got car sick all the time. So she would sit in the middle, in those station wagons, they were so big, and she would sit in the middle of the front seat, and Marty, he would sit down here. He was like 2 years old. He would sit here, and, you know, and the other 4 were in the back, and of course you got a lot of luggage, and we did have a carrier where we put luggage in. And that was wonderful. That was one of the bigger trips. And then I had relatives living in Rapid City, and we went out there a lot. I had a brother and a sister out there, and Jake had a brother over there, and they were close to our age, and we did a lot of things together. So we went out there just about every year, stayed out there for a few days. And then after they got older, we took a trip to Niagara Falls and Washington, D.C. and New York. Had the 6 kids and a dog and my niece in another new station wagon, yes. And that was a wonderful trip. I mean, and we, you know, they say, how'd we ever do it, you know? They pretty much liked it. I mean, they agreed, you know. I remember one time we had, you know, I'd buy rolls in the morning, you know, at the grocery store to have breakfast, and, you know, you just kind of had to skimp along with what, you know, make things do what you had to do. But they didn't mind. I mean, you cringe when you think of how you were traveling and speed you were going, and no seat belts on, and the kids are sitting on the floor. And because Marty was so little, he always sat and played in front seat for me. I don't know what they did. They're just really nothing, I guess. So they slept, and I mean, there was nothing entertaining. We'd have lunch, we'd stop and have lunch, but it was a lot of driving. And then we went to Florida to Disney a couple times with all of them, and that was, they always liked that. But it was, the trip we took to New York and to Washington, D.C., well, it was so hard to get around in Washington, so we just hired a limousine, to drive us around, and took us around. So that was, exciting for the kids. And yeah, we'd go stop at malls and stop and eat at different places or buy groceries. It was a lot of driving, but station wagons were big those days. I mean, they actually had more room than these SUVs they have now, some of these. We went, and when Marty and Randy were just home then, we went to Hawaii a couple of times. We took them to Hawaii. I don't think the family ever got all to go to Hawaii. And with our company, we got to go to Mexico, and then we started going on cruises with the family. One year we took all the grandkids and the spouses, there was 31 of us, went on a cruise. That was a big cruise we all went on. And then it seemed like every year we were on a cruise, the girls would go along, and it was just the family. So those were the big, the nice trips we took. We took a lot of trips when we were looking with the Randall Company. I mean, they had their own plane. And well, what else? I mean, that's what you looked forward to at those days. I mean, of course, we had a boat here. After we moved here, Mr. Randall had a cabin cruiser up in Minneapolis, so he said we could use that. So we went up, got that. We had a cabin cruiser down the Mississippi for several years. That's how we got into boating. It's one thing, we did a lot of boating, and we're on the beach with the kids when they were younger. That was one of the things, entertainment, that we did. Then we had a cabin down by the Mississippi River. So we go down there for the weekends. So that, took up the weekends. And me growing up, there wasn't such a thing as a vacation. Well, I did my older brother and dad. I think they went to one of the World's Fairs one time. But people didn't travel those days. But, Disney was something, and Boonesbury Farm was there, I think, and something else. So, and we went to Las Vegas several times, and with the kids. And my parents gave me what they had, and I gave my children what I had. So I couldn't give them any more than I have, and I taught them right from wrong. I told them to be honest, and everyday life. And we practiced it, and I think practicing it, they see what they do what they see. So yeah, it's been good with the 6. We're all speaking.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah, we all get together. I mean, they all come home for my birthday.
Yeah.
Been in the last 5 years. My son lives in Austin, Texas, and he's been real good. We were down there to see him. He lives by himself. He has a beautiful home. The girls and I went down and visited him there. We just went to Florida to a wedding, and the girls all were there. We rented a home, and yeah, it's just family. I mean, just whatever comes along, you take advantage of. And that's kind of what we did through life. I mean, we had a job, and we knew we had to do the job, and I mean, we did all right, otherwise we'd never gotten promoted and got things better. We got a very nice retirement with the company. So, went on a cruise last February, yes, went on a cruise, and I'm going to Florida, I think, in March, and whatever comes along, I'm on. So, as long as my health is with me, and as long as, of course, I try to get, handicap when I'm traveling, so, you know, because that's a lot of walking. But other than that, I'm fine, you know, with it. So, well, they're self-contained, and you do whatever you want. You know, when the first ones we went with, we only had one requirement. Everybody comes to dinner. We had reservations for dinner. And it's kind of that way still. You know, we go on a cruise, you know, of course you usually end up having breakfast with a group where you're in and where you say, well, we'll meet you here or there, you know, but there's nothing set in stone except you have the same dinner hour and we all eat dinner there. And then spring we were in, we're down to Marty's and went to Austin, Texas, the girls and I, and just take little trips here and there. Whatever comes along, I'm ready to go, so. Well, then I started sewing for the grandkids too, with the little grandkids. Of course, I was working at the time, and I had Wednesdays off, and I remember I would babysit the grandkids because they could work because they were, you know, that's when they could work because they had children. There was only one or two, you know, so I would babysit them. But, yeah, we just, you know, you just help one another out and do what's right, and you know, we'll hope for the best. 14
grandkids.
And 24, be the 24th one in February, great grandkids. I just enjoy, you know, especially like Teresa's and Natalie's, you know, they're in town and they're just so little, you know, and they just, you know, they're so appreciative and they're so polite, kind, you know, and it's just so nice to see them, yeah. Well, let's see, what do? We usually get together to eat. We're always eating, we're always getting together to eat. And I don't know, for my birthday we went down the cottage and they all come down there and played. It was nice to see all the little grandkids, the great grandkids, the ones from out of town, they all, you know, get together and have fun and, you know, like they know each other every day. So it's just nice to see them growing up and they're so healthy and funny and they're just so nice to have here because they're not all here. It's Teresa's and Natalie's that are in town, and Shirley's girls are 11 and 14, so they're kind of out of that. But I still enjoy having them, and we do funny things together and go to lunch or breakfast together with them. And then, of course, Randy, they're down in Bellevue, so I don't get to see too much, you know, they're both working, so it's just, you know, it's nice to see them here in town when I can spend time with them, so, yeah. When we went to the wedding, you know, that was all the grandkids that we stayed, Teresa and Natalie and Katie, you know, we stayed at this house together. Yeah, they're very nice adults now. They're not grandkids, are they, Teresa? It's just nice to see, you know, how well they've done. You know, I did the best I could at the time. They probably didn't get as much as their kids get today, but it's a learning process. You just, you know, you do what you have to do with what you got. So it's been nice, it's been good. And of course, your health is number one. Number one. You know, like, I could live here by myself, but without Shirley and Mary, it'd be kind of tough. Because the guys, they come and do one of them does my grass and one of them does the snow, so the husband, so.
Good.
And it's so nice to, you know, they just stop in and visit, or we just go out to, and you know, it's nothing really big planned, it's just getting together and visiting and gossiping and, yeah. It's 15 years ago already. We were in Arizona, and he fell off the back steps and he had a brain concussion and passed away. That he never recovered from it. I mean, he passed away 2 days later, but the kids all came down, so. But then I stayed down there up until 3 years ago. I went down there by myself. Because we had a car down there, left a car down there. It was a double and a half mobile home. And the kids all got to come down then, come down to visit every year, it was nice to have that. Well, we had a cabin down the river. We had a cottage down there. We'd go down there on weekends. I don't know, what did we do? I belonged to a euchre club, and my husband, he'd go down and have coffee at Rings with the guys. And I mean, we'd go up to Timmerman's on Friday nights, and we were married 60 years in October, and then my husband passed away in that February. So we had a good 60 years with the family, and the family's been good. I mean, we've just had no problems with them. And yes, on the farm, of course, growing up on the farm, you had to have a garden. And I didn't have too much space for gardens, but I do like flowers. I like to plant flowers and plants, and I have a box out in my deck that I plant tomatoes in, and I have a little flower garden out on my deck, and have a little flower bed in the back of my house. And yeah, I love flowers. I love plants, and I love flowers. And of course, on the farm, it was a big chore, because when we lived on the farm, we raised, we probably over an acre of potatoes that we grew, because that was our staple. And of course, they had to be hoed, and then you had to shake the bugs off of them. I mean, that was quite a process. And then I remember my dad used to dig the potatoes in the fall, and he'd leave them lay out. And when we got home from school, we'd have to pick the potatoes up and put them in a bucket. And we would have maybe an 8x8 bin full of potatoes, because that was our staple. That was the family staple. I mean, if you have potatoes and chicken and eggs, you weren't going to be starving. And of course, my brothers, they were big hunters, and we had a lot of pheasants. And so it was, you just learn to make do with what you got. I mean, yeah. We didn't have a lot on the farm, but after we got to working, and we were lucky to have good jobs and good bosses, and a lot is decision making. I mean, when they ask us to move, we said, so many wives say, "Oh no, I'm staying home with my family," But to pick up 6 children with a 3-week-old baby. When we moved from Sioux Falls to Dubuque, Marty was 3 weeks old. My oldest brother, he was quite talented, for no schooling, well, he had his 8th grade country school there. But he had purchased some land along a lake we had, and he put in a big garden down there, cucumbers, a half-acre cucumbers and watermelons. Well, at the time he was busy in the field, so I'd have to go down and pick the cucumbers. I probably picked 7 bushels of cucumbers at one time. So I learned a lot. I did a lot of gardening there, and of course we had tomatoes and we had beans and we had chokecherry trees. My dad loved his chokecherry wine. He made wonderful chokecherry wine, and then of course when we moved to town, we moved to Dubuque here. I just had little garden spots, I put a couple of tomatoes. But I did do my flowers and plants and, my mother had she had a Triddle Singer sewing machine at home. So she showed me how to hem, because you had a flour sack and you hemmed it, so then you had a dish towel. And then she would help me make aprons, and I'd hem the aprons or do the aprons. And then also we did mending socks, or socks had a hole, we had to stitch some thread through them and mend the heel, so I did that. And I did a lot of embroidery at that time, because that was the thing going in, and dresser scarves and pillowcases. I did a lot of embroidery work. And then after we had babies, and of course there was no diapers to buy, so I bought flannel, and I made the old diapers, so I had to hem them. And then I made little kimonos for the babies, little nighties for when we had the babies. And then I made the little dresses for them, and as they advanced, I remember Linda, for Christmas, I made her little corduroy outfit, and that's when I learned how to do corduroy, that you make sure it's going one way. And I did a lot of sewing for the girls as they got bigger, and just nothing fancy, real fancy. I did, when Linda got married, I did make my own Mother of the Bride dress. I sewed that. I had an inner lining in it. And I sewed, like I said, I sewed a lot of bridesmaid dresses. Well, the girls, they were all pretty much the same size, and it was a high empire, but I used different materials and different designs and everything. So, but I liked sewing, and I still do sewing. I still have my sewing machine downstairs, and I still do some sewing. And yeah, what did I hemmed something the other day. I went down, but just nothing. I don't cut anything out. It's just maybe hemming something shut or closing up. I mean, it's my decision, and as long as I can cope with it. I mean, as long as they're along to help me, I mean, it works out nice. I said, either you come visit me here or in a home, take your choice. So it's been wonderful. I've just been very lucky with my family, my whole family. They're all helpful, and I drive. Went to bridge today. I had lunch with the ladies, and sometimes there's 8 of us, sometimes there's 12 of us that play. I played 24 hands of bridge this afternoon, and come home and take a little nap, and and that's about all I get out. Well, I go out and do some of my grocery shopping. Mary usually brings it from Bellevue, because my son has a store down there. So, but I do my own banking and whatever I need. So, I just drive around town. They don't let me go out of town anymore. I used to drive, to look. I had a sister up in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I always used to go up there a couple times a year, but she has passed away, but I have a niece there, so I miss going up there. The girls, we usually take a little fall trip, and so we'll go out and drive someplace and have lunch and have a beer, and it's fun little trips. Yeah. But as far as driving myself, I could drive to Bellevue or down the cottage, but they choose for me not to, so. And the nice part, the 2 girls that live here in town, they bring me all their leftovers, so I really don't have to do a lot of cooking. And they're all good cooks, so, their leftovers are 2 good meals for me, so sometimes I don't even have to put the kettle on the stove at all. I just put it in the microwave, so that's been a really big plus. No kettles to wash, no kettles to scrub.
Yeah.
I did bake some banana bread last week, but as far as baking, I don't do too much of that because they do so much for me, so. Be honest, I mean, and respectful. I mean, that's my life. I mean, if you're respectful and you're honest, what else is there? You know? So, I practice that every day, so that's hopefully all my children do too. I guess I've always been friendly and kind. That's what else? I guess that would be about it, you know. Respectful and honest and kind to people. And I just go back to being honest, you know, and reliable and respectful. I mean, that's my life, and it's practice that, and I hope my family does too. I mean, if you do that, you don't get into trouble. It's been a good life. Worked hard and made good decisions.
Yeah.
Decisions is a big part of life. So you young people, you all need to think about that when you're doing, you know, what's this decision going to be for me in the future? I mean, our whole life was the right decision that we made from time to time. If every move, you know, we made, it was a big decision, especially after you have 6 children. So,
Yeah.
but it's got to be, you know, you got to think it out. You just can't jump, you know, at something. But you kind of think it through.
Yeah.
Know where you're going with it.